Hello and welcome to another episode of Younger by the Minute. I'm your host, Jamie Spicer, and I'm always here with my lovely host.
Jennifer Spicer. And I am so excited today because today we have a special guest who is named Greg Scheinman. He is the voice and force behind Midlife Mail. Greg is an open book when it comes to sharing his journey, successes, setbacks, and everything in between. Through his podcast, writing, and coaching, he helps men live life by design, not by default, using his proven framework built on the 6 F's: family, fitness, finance, faith, friends, and last but not least, fun. His mission is to show men that midlife is not crisis, it's an opportunity, and that aligns beautifully with what we believe at Precision, which is investing in your health, your mindset, and yes, even your skin. Hi, Greg. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, it's great to be here. Good to see you, Jamie. Good to see you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on, and I'm really excited to pick your brain on some of this stuff because I think me and you think logically the same way. So it's going to be great to meeting of the minds, if you want to call it that.
Well, and
So
you're both
We
the
can
same
try because if
age.
I'm thinking logically, then something is wrong. So
right, right, and I think we're in the same ballpark as far as age. So yeah, I think we probably are going through some of the same stuff at the same time, and probably been through some of the same stuff at the same time. So
Well, and before we jumped on here, we were kind of sharing back and forth about travel and just managing all the different places. Like you said, a moving target. You say that you're an open book. How do you juggle running your own business, helping all of these other men, then also being a good husband and a good father to your 2 sons?
sure, it's a great question. I mean, one of the reasons I start by saying that I'm an open book is because it's simpler. It's simpler than having to remember what it is that I'm wanting to hide or what it is that it's just simpler to be open and honest about everything that is going on. And I still don't know how I necessarily juggle or deal with everything that is in my life. It's one of the reasons that the column in our newsletter that we do every week with these interviews with guys is called How I See It, because I'm just fascinated and interested in how other guys see their lives and how they do anything and what I can learn from that. What I am able to do and what I hope other guys are paying attention to is simply trying to do my best. And what does that look like? What systems and what formats and what practices can I have in place and habits and behaviors that help me just get better on there? So, look, I live on my calendar. That's the number one thing. How do I really juggle it? I juggle it because I put everything on the calendar. And then it becomes measurable, quantifiable, whether I can handle it. Is it too little? Is it too much? I was saying, show me your calendar, I'll show you your priorities. Does
yep.
it mesh with those 6 F's: family, fitness, finance, fun, the things that are most important to me. So it kind of went from flying by the seat of my pants, if you will, in my 20s and 30s and thinking that that's the way real entrepreneurship and that's the way the real rebellious outliers do it, to more meticulous organization. And what I found is that by being more organized, being more measurable, being more quantifiable, living off the calendar, putting things down, that I've actually be able to become much freer because I have a real greater understanding of where all my time and energy and bandwidth is going.
Right. And yet I think you clear up any negativity you might have because you forgot something that was important, an anniversary or a birthday or something like that, because you have it on your calendar. And of course, we know you can't track what you don't measure. So,
Exactly, and look, there will always be mistakes, and there will always be missteps, and there will always be double booking, and there are all of these
yep.
things because we're human, and again, trying to do the very best we can, and I call them kind of problems of prosperity. As our lives have expanded, as our businesses have grown, as our networks have gotten bigger, as new people have come into our lives, you're constantly evolving and pivoting and trying to figure out how it all fits and what all fits in there. So I think a big part of it is being kind to ourselves during the process. You're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna have missteps. It's if you're accountable to it again and you just own it and you speak up about the things that are going on, it has a better way of working out.
Yeah.
I agree with that because I think that, humans, when our ego is in control, we don't want to admit that we've made a mistake or made a misstep. But when you're transparent and you're honest, that might just be the exact thing that the person next to you needs, or your fellow brother or sister or whatever that is. And I think that when we share these things that we deal with, that's what helps us all live a more abundant life. Because at the end of the day, we're not dying with our money, we're dying with the impact that we left on the people that are still here to live that out.
Right.
Absolutely. There's a chapter in my book called Breaking Up with Your Ego, and it's really exactly about this again. And I just go back to the overall premise that, you know, simple is hard, which is why most people don't do it. But ideally, like we're not like most. When you complicate things, it becomes just that. It becomes more complicated. When you involve ego, when you look to make excuses or shortcuts, or puff out your chest or get defensive, and things get harder. That's a very again, it's a simple better one or better two analysis on that.
Yeah.
Just trial and error, which one works better? Listen, when I own it, when I'm proactive, when I apologize, does it work better than when I put false bravado out there, try to hide something, cover it up? And you can test and retest these things over and over again, just like you were talking about in the gym,
Yeah.
in there too. Hey, when I exercise this way or train this way versus this way, do I feel better? When I get 7, 8 hours of sleep, do I feel better than when I get 4, 5? All of these areas, you can ask yourself that question. And we often we know the answer. We know the right answer.
Right.
The
Yeah.
hard
And I
part is
think,
doing it.
yeah. And I think that's a really good point because that's something I talk about with clients in the gym when they want to know, should I be tracking how much weight I lift and everything? I'm like, well, you can, but you have to remember that each week or each day brings new variables. And you kind of nailed it. I wasn't as strong on chest day this day, but then the question, like, did you have as much food? Did you have as much water? Did you get as much sleep? Were
Yep.
you distracted with your phone because you were stressed out? Like, there's a lot of variables that can cause you not to be as strong that day, but you're not giving yourself the grace or acknowledging why. You're just expect yourself to perform day in and day out at the same level, but life continues to hand you new problems.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's that kind of one of one in that regard. Can I be the best version of myself today?
Correct.
I'm only as good as my worst day. And nobody ever knows what's going on,
Yep.
only behind the scenes.
Right.
No, and that's why I think when you talk about living your life by design, not default, we go into autopilot. And obviously, I'm not a man, but I do think that strong men always, they measure their output, they measure their success, they measure how well they can solve the problem, how well they can provide. And I think sometimes that overcomes, taking a step back and actually being intentional with your day and how you're planning. And then all of a sudden, I think the reason why a lot of men have a midlife crisis is because they've lost their identity in trying to find their identity because they're putting it outside versus inside. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about how you got to creating the foundation of the 6 F's and what it means to you to live by design? Like you mentioned that you plan your day and you plan your calendar, but do you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Sure. And there's so much there to unpack that you covered because you nailed so much of it. Uh, I think like a lot of guys in the avatar that you described, and I certainly was one of them, I grew up chasing salary and title, following the traditional path, if you will. I mean, I grew up in an upscale neighborhood. My father unfortunately passed away when I was in my teens. And I was always it was ingrained to me from where I came from that you go to school, you go to a good college, you get your degree, then you go out and you get a job, and then you meet the right woman, and then you get married and you have kids, and then you move to the suburb. And it's always up, 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 and you're chasing this path of salary and title. And that's what success looks like. And what happens is a lot of us, and myself again included, fall into what I call the over indexing trap. That becomes our
Mhm.
identity. That okay, again, how much money am I making? What is the title? Am I on this upward trajectory? And I'm doing it all for my family and all for the optics and all for the reasons, that have been in and the values that have been ingrained in me my entire life. And flash forward 10, 15, 20 years go by. And you're not really sure, what do I do? How the fuck I got here? Like, how did this
Right.
all happen?
Hmm.
And I don't really know who I am or how I feel or what's really important, or did I really prioritize the right things, or am I prioritizing the right things? Am I staying at work late and missing my kids' game? Am I, not taking the vacations that I said I always would? Are we adding size to the house or cars to the driveway or other than like what are we doing all this stuff for?
Right.
And I just felt like all of that was happening to me and happening at me instead of, again, taking that step back, like you said, and going, hey, what is it that I really want? What does success really look like? More importantly, what does it live like and what does it feel like? Because I don't think I've got this right.
Hmm.
And I'm 47 years old at the time. So I'm the same age as when my dad passed away. I have this multi-million dollar book of business in the insurance industry. I've opened and closed multiple companies before that. My kids are getting older. We've got the house, the private school. And I remember, like it was yesterday, I'm sitting in that parking lot of the office building in the fancy car, in the suit that I don't even like wearing. And I'm looking at the building, and my office is on the 25th floor, overlooking all of downtown Houston. And I'm like, I can't get out of the car. And that's really what was the impetus to take a good, hard, long look in the mirror and say there have to be some other options, again, some other choices, some other ways of doing things. And to your point, Jennifer, I didn't know how. I think a lot of guys know why they want to be in better shape, why they want to be better husbands, why they want to be better fathers, why they're making all this money, why they're doing all these things. But the problem is they don't know how. They don't know how to make the changes because again, we've been over indexing for so long. So that's how this all got started for me. It was ego. You talked about ego before. My ego didn't allow me to say this to anybody, my business partners, my wife, certainly my kids, my clients. So I was like, well, let me just start a podcast because then I can ask all these questions that I have to all these smarter people. And then I'm doing it in the name of journalism, if you will. And I have to, like, it's not my vulnerability. It's not all my problems. It's the responsible questions I should be asking of all these other smart men. So it was really very selfish and very ego driven. I didn't care if anybody listened. I just wanted the answers. And that's
Yeah.
how it started. And I started listening to these guys and applying what I learned. And that's how, okay, what were they talking about? Family and finance and fitness and food, which is nutrition, and even fashion and style and fun. And they were giving me all this ammunition, all this wisdom, all this experience. And all I started doing was testing and retesting it.
Right. Which I think probably brought down your fear level with,
Again, once you strip
the
it
fear of
down,
change. Yeah.
right? Once you strip it down and go, okay, well, guess what? I've been doing things this way for a really long time. And you know what? It's not working. So what's the George Costanza rule of like Seinfeld? If that's how old I am, I'm 52 going on 53. It's like, do the opposite.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
if what you're doing is not working, do the opposite. And that's essentially what I started to do. And from 47 to 50, everything changed.
Well, and I think, there's a lot to unpack there too. I'm sure with just your inner spirit, with it being the same age that you lost your father. And I'm so sorry for your loss. And as we've talked over the last few months of getting to know each other, I will say that it's evident that you took that tragedy and made sure that you were a good dad because you are there and you are present. And that's admirable because sometimes people lose themselves in that loss. You lose pieces of you along the way. And I think what you're doing is such a great movement for men because women, we connect by communication. We talk about everything, so we get it all out. Men stuff it all down and then it starts to express itself because the body always keeps the score. So even though you'll be like, oh, I'm going to compartmentalize this. You got stuck in the car, you didn't get out of the car, but that allowed you to change. Some men would have just pushed through, and then God forbid what would have happened from a physiological standpoint because you weren't dealing with the mental health component of it. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing and talking about.
I'm a slow learner and a late bloomer.
I'm
And
in
I
that
think
club.
we're always continuing to learn and to try to improve and to get better, and that's a conscious decision. I think we all have choices again. The actions we take and the choices we make determine our outcome. I
Okay.
believe that now, and I was not, again, always the way that I am now. My wife and I were just talking about it the other day, and we have our couples appointment tonight, and now we're starting to do that. And these are things we never did, before. But I went there in my 20s and 30s. It wasn't like my father passed away and I made this commitment at that time that I was going to live a better life and be a better person. I went I went there. I went to the drugs and went to the alcohol and went to the recklessness and back to this, hey, you won't ask, like, I tried everything. Okay.
Right.
Try a lot of things. You figure out again what works and what does not work. And what I learned was, look, drugs, alcohol, recklessness, these are not sustainable. They're not recipes for success any more than literally chasing salary and title and dying at your desk is in it. There are all of these areas, whether it's too much of a good thing or too much of a not so good thing, you get to a point ultimately, and nobody can put you into this spot or tell you where it's going to be, just like the proverbial midlife crisis. I know really old 30 somethings and really young 70 somethings, that are
Hmm.
there. Every individual finds it at a different time or gets to that tipping spot at a different time, a different situation, or a different circumstance. They get to that spot, and the real question is, does this situation or circumstance defeat us or does it define us? And that's when you've got to make that choice. Am I going to change? And once you decide that you're going to do it, then you've got to focus really and double down on the how am I going to do it? What do I do every day? Just like the precision skincare routine. Don't have a routine, you're flying blind. You send me each product that I am supposed to use in a specific order with the instructions, and I'm like a golden retriever. Okay. Throw the ball, bring it back. I can follow that. But without a plan, or without a map or without direction, how are you going to do that? Again, and how are you going to know what's working and what's not working?
Yeah, it's like trying to fly a plane without optics, and I don't think anybody would want to be on a plane with no optics up there
No,
No.
flying blind.
no.
Well,
And
it
it's
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it's like navigation also. Like the
Yeah.
analogy of a plane is a really good one. There's a story about how in navigation, if you set the flight path and you deviate from the flight path 1 degree, you're not going to notice it right away. But if you stay 1 degree off course and you stay 1 degree off course for hour after hour after hour, guess what? You plan to land in Los Angeles, you're landing in Australia. Like that's what
Well,
happens to this curve. And I think that's very emblematic of what happens to men. They start off on a path, which is potentially the good path or the right path or one that feels right for them. But over time, they deviate by 1 degree, and they just let it continue without course correcting, and they end up again 20s, 30s, 40s, they end up in a completely different place than where they set out to be.
you're right, and I think to go back to one thing that you said, I remember my first rock bottom, I was 26, and I realized that the recklessness, the drugs, the alcohol wasn't going to help me any longer because eventually you have to take inventory of yourself. You have to be able to be willing to look at the hard parts and then make a change. And then not to sound negative, there's going to come another time in your life, depending on when you hit the first one, that you have to then take another step back because it's not a linear path. It's actually, to me, a spiral staircase, and you hope that you're ascending up. The patterns and the wiring and firing are all there, and we're just like these layers of an onion that you have to peel back. And if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a framework to take care of yourself, if you don't take inventory of what's going on day in and day out, to what you said this morning, we had crazy stuff happen at our facility. Like they're drilling through the roof. We're trying to do a coaching call with Tony Robbins guy that we have, and it's all these things. And he said to me, he's like, "Okay, well, remember, you have to start each task with what is your desired outcome." And then how are you going to get there? If we just continue to go blindly through life and then all of a sudden things kept catch up to us, we are going to be lost
Mhm.
because without taking inventory and looking at which bucket needs to be filled, whether it's finances, fun, family, whatever, something's going in the red. And if you keep something in the red long enough, it eventually becomes necrotic and it dies.
Mm. I think it's exactly right. And I think when individuals take ownership, whether they're male or female or at any age or stage, to your point, they start to think about what it is that they want. They then reverse engineer back to how they are going to achieve it or accomplish it. They set standards, and when you adhere to the standards, the outcome becomes inevitable. If you put those pieces together, it becomes very formulaic, and it does become a lot simpler. And we need that in life because, as you mentioned, there are always going to be those variables. There are always going to be those things that are outside of our control or just happen. Every day we wake up and we say, "This is what I planned on doing today." And every day life tries to stop us from doing those things,
Right.
just
Right.
those things.
No, completely agree. I'd be curious on this one, what your opinion on it is, but what do you think men are getting wrong or overlooking when it comes to taking care of themselves in their midlife or
Mm.
even before midlife?
I think it's twofold. I think what we have is I think we've got a challenge with a large portion of the population doing nothing, conformity, complacency, redundancy, and just allowing themselves to buy bigger pants, every month and every
Right.
year on there. And then we have a growing portion of the population with men that I think are over indexing in the biohacking and the extremes and the doing too much. And where we have a ton of white space is in the middle.
Yeah.
Doing nothing is not a strategy for success at all. Burying your head in the sand, being in denial, accepting the dad bod or getting bigger, whatever it might be, doing nothing is not a strategy. Doing everything is also proving out to not be such a sustainable strategy to try to live to 150 and take 500 pills a day and getting your blood work done every 17 minutes and all of these things that are going on out there. So what I really talk a lot about and work with my clients, the men that I coach one-on-one across the country who are smart, accomplished men between 40 and 55, and what are they looking to do? We call it master the middle. What is your sweet spot? What does again success look like to you? If I want to be 175 pounds, 10% body fat, be able to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, with who I want to do it with, for as long as I want to do it, what do I need minimum effective dose to maintain that standard? And then now, if I want to go win high rocks or some event, if I want to be an elite level athlete, if I want to get on a stage and there's a whole different set of standards that's there. But if I want to be a good husband, a good father, and all these metrics of how much money do I want to make? How many hours necessarily do I want to work? How much time do I want to spend with my kids? I think this problems that middle-aged men are experiencing are it's this zero sum game of all or nothing.
Yeah.
And that creates paralysis by analysis. I can't do it. I don't think I can do it. And what we're really trying to do at Midlife Male as a company, even beyond my coaching practice in the book, what we're really trying to do is help guys master the middle and see not only what is possible out there, but what is probable for them. You don't have to do what I do or exactly as I do it, but maybe you can pull one or two things from my midlife action plan, my map, and employ into yours. You're not going to live like Troy Aikman, but maybe you can listen to that interview with Troy Aikman and glean a couple of things that you could apply into your life. You could listen to this conversation and maybe you walk away with a skin tip or two or whatever it might be. But
Right.
being able to build out your own plan. And I think the eye opener here for guys is that, hey, I can do that too because I can see this guy in Greg. I can see the people that he's talking to, and I can see myself in them so that it's relatable and it's credible, but it's also aspirational. But it's not so fear inducing and extreme that it stops you in your tracks. And if you are that extreme and you're living that way and you're doing more power to you, but I'm not interested in what Brian Johnson is doing and spending $4 million a year to live to 150. And I'm not interested in
Right.
what these big biohackers are doing. It doesn't seem like a whole lot of fun to me. And fun is a big part of my overall approach to life.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I
fu
think it's like I always compare everything back to an analogy of money and health, right? So you have investment vehicles that you put your money into. You're not watching it the way some of these people watch the scale. Some of these people every day on the scale, but they're not watching their finances. And some people are, not watching the scale, but they're watching their finances. But you have investment vehicles that you put your money into. And like you said, you could go to the extreme and like you put all your money into it and then you don't have any fun money left over. or you find the balance between your financial future, so your savings plan, then you have your hard expenses where you put your money into like your house payment, car payment, and then you have leftover fun money. But you got to find the balance in there. You can't be one extreme or the other, because I know for a fact that no matter how much you love doing something, if you do it too long, too much, you're just going to get burnt out on it. You're
Well,
not going to
somebody was
have the
asking
same
me that
fulfill.
yesterday. They're like, "Oh, do you love what you do?" I'm like, "Yes, I love what I do. I love what I do now more than I've ever enjoyed doing anything in my life from a professional standpoint." And I think finding that intersection of professional expertise and personal passion is really unique. And when you find it, go and lean in on that. At the same time, I think we can all attest to this. I don't care, like I said, I don't care how much you love something, it's work. At a certain point, it is work. It is work to crank out the newsletter. It's work to get to the gym. It's work to appear on the podcast. It's work to travel to these all of these bucket list things even that have happened and are continuing to happen. When you do them enough over and over again, it is still you have to treat it like a job, and it is a job. And yes, does it fill my tank more than it drains it? Absolutely. And that's why I enjoy it and stay with it. But are there days where it's incredibly daunting, incredibly draining, incredibly frustrating? Because all of these businesses and practices and everything that we are involved in, they have these other layers that you just can't escape. We still got to do taxes. We still got to reconcile the books. We still got to figure like you still got to run all this stuff that comes with success, that comes with achievement, which comes from purpose. All of these other things can be great, but yeah, it's work.
Yep.
And if you
Yeah.
want rainbows and unicorns and you want it to literally just be fun all the time, like, sorry, I'm kind of a straight shooter, like right down the middle. It's not, nothing is going to be that 100% of the time.
No.
No, but there's something to take from every peak and every valley, right? So it's, when you're going through those moments in life, how can you have fun when it's challenging? Because fun will help you live to 100. It helps to lengthen your telomeres,
Mm.
dancing, all of that stuff. So finding a little bit for each day, and I think that's where the framework that you've developed is very helpful. And so if somebody listening is struggling with energy, identity, or even direction, in their 40s to 55 years old, where do you recommend that they start?
Mm. I have 5 rules. I think if you follow these 5 rules, you are going to be better than you are today. First of all, where do you start and when do you start? Today is the day you start. That is
Yep.
always the answer. I mean, people, the thing that hangs guy people up in general, whether it's men or women, middle age or any other age, I think everything that I do applies to every age, stage, demographic, gender, whatever. I happen to focus on the midlife male lane just because
Hmm.
that's what I know. And having been married for
Right.
25 years, I know to stay in my lane. Okay. And do speak to midlife men and I can speak for midlife men to an extent, but I don't speak for anybody else because that's where I am. But what hangs a lot of people up to begin with is they don't know they
Mhm.
don't get started. There's always a reason not to start. So today is always the day to start. You can swap a soda for water. You can kiss your wife good morning instead of rolling out of bed and ignoring her, taking her for granted because you've been married so long. You can call your kids or take them to school. You can leave work a little early. You can take the stairs. You can prepare a meal instead of going to the drive-through. There are a gazillion tiny little things that you can do one at a time, each and every day, starting today to make an improvement and be a little bit better than yesterday. So today is the day, and you already know at least a dozen of those. Everyone can rattle off, a dozen things that they could do a little bit better, and they could start today, and they never do because tomorrow always sounds better, and tomorrow never comes. So the number one thing to do is to start today with one thing, and then
It stacks
keep
up.
the streak
Yeah.
going. Yes, you stack the little wins. And here's the thing when you break the streak, and we will all break the streak, myself
Yeah.
included, start over, start a new streak. And the next streak, we try to make it one day longer than we did before, or one fewer Diet Coke than the day before, whatever it may be. But here's the thing rule number one knowing what's important is what's most important. If you don't know that, that's also where you start. Sit down, grab yourself a pad, okay, and a pen and start
Mhm.
writing down the shit that's really important to you. And if you don't know what it is, and a lot of men struggle with this, write down all the shit you know isn't important to you, the stuff that you don't like, what you're doing that you don't want to do. And you can back into figuring out what's really actually important and where your values are. Number two, that if you don't know where you're going, you are never going to get there. Like you talked about the plane and the degrees, you got to know where you're going, what success looks like, your job, your physical, your standards, your metrics, and then reverse engineer back to what path am I going to take to get there. Three is aggregate, curate, eliminate, which I call my ACE principle. There is so much noise out there. We're bombarded with noise, influencers, products, brands, services, masterminds. Keep going. Okay. You got to aggregate from what's out there, curate it down to what works for you, and be ruthless about eliminating the stuff that does not. You got to kill all of the distractions that are out there. Number four, show me your calendar. I'll show you your priorities. We started there. What gets scheduled gets done. And number five, grace, gratitude, and latitude. Don't forget to be kind to yourself along the way because you are going to mess this up. We all are.
Great, they're great inputs. I love those.
I love that. And it's when you listen to the people that seem like they've been able to, well, not seem, have been able to overcome and now have this presence and this ability to connect to other people, it's there it's kind of like a fitness or nutrition.
Mhm.
There's a few ways to skin a cat, but the underlying principles are all the same. They might have different terminology, but it's all the same. If you look at the people that are actually doing it, it always is leaving clues. So, to parlay that into a product, as you just said, there's products being thrown everywhere. You've mentioned that you've added precision skincare to your routine. What led you to want to do this and why?
Yeah. Exactly what you just talked about, which is you look at successful people or people that you admire or that inspire you out there, and you can kind of see them. And then okay, you can see that. And everybody does something differently out there. No one way to be successful. But again, the framework totally works. How did it happen? I think we can share this. Like I met a guy in Hawaii standing in the Pacific Ocean, basically. I was out in Hawaii in like February for an XPT adventure, which is this underwater training with Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. And I love doing these things. So I was out there for a week. It was my first time in Hawaii. And on the last day, I had like 4 hours to kill before I had to go to the airport. And I'm just hanging out. I'm in the water, in the ocean, in the back of the hotel. And there's another guy in there. And he's like a cool, good looking guy. He's got great sunglasses on. He's got good hair. He's tan. He's everything. He looks pretty fit. And we end up striking up a conversation. Um, his name is Nick. I think we can share. So his name is Nick. Nick and I are chatting out there, and he's there training for an Ironman. And we get it to know, oh, so we've got a lot in common. Also, the guy's got really good skin, and I pay attention to these things too. He's got really good skin. We become friendly. I end up interviewing him because he's got an incredible background. And one of the things I asked him about was his skin. I was like, these things matter. And he tells me all about you and precision skincare and what he's doing. And the next thing I know, we're connected and you guys are awesome. And I got to try and sample the products. And I have, another like thesis on how you do things. I'm always you know, buy, try, give it time, see what works. And spent 90 days with the products, trying them, using them, seeing how I was feeling, seeing how I was looking. And that's how I think credibility and relationships develop. And you can't do anything for my hair. Okay. That's okay. My skin looks better than it ever has, and my wife noticed this. I know this. I have not had traditionally good skin going, for my entire life. So I'm always self-conscious about that. I was the guy that would like get a blemish and not leave the house. I'm still kind of like that. And they always seem to spring up right before I have a speaking gig or something like
Always.
Every
always.
time.
So anything that can kind of help my confidence, help my anxiety, help my stress level, overall, it's not just for the vanity standpoint and the aesthetic standpoint, but it's how I feel mentally, kind of and emotionally when I'm doing things that work and they're showing up on on the outside as well. So that's how I got into how we met and how the
Yep.
products have gotten into my house and how I'm extremely happy to talk about them to our entire audience of men, and always under the same thing of, "Hey, try it. Try it." Okay? Customize. We're all different. Think about it. Here's the entire line. But what I look more is, do we trust the people behind the brands also?
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that, and I can say, like, I can attest that you wanted to try it. You do only speak of things that you actually believe in, and that says a lot because there are a lot of influencers out there, and skincare is a trillion-dollar business. But the other thing that I really wanna dig in on is I like that you're masculine enough, you're comfortable enough in your masculinity to say, "I use skincare," or that, "I do feel better when I look better," or, because we all do look at each other, and, men it's been such a taboo thing for men to start to do these things, and I think it's gaining awareness as it should, but it's really important. We just all deserve to feel confident in our own skin,
Yep.
you know?
Stereotypes and stigmas, especially for men, need to be broken down.
Mhm.
Yes, I
I
agree.
think it's really helpful, and it's not, again, we've gone to extremes, again, with mental health. We've gone to all of these and back to, again, mastering the middle. What makes me feel good, and what do I think ultimately helps other guys feel good? Just being honest. Just being honest there. Look, here's the thing, I don't mind being bald. I mind being fat and bald. I really mind being fat and bald with bad skin. So
Skin.
what am I
Yeah.
gonna work controlling the controllables. There are
Yep.
other there are other guys, listen, do you wanna go get a hair transplant? Go get a hair transplant. I'll steer you to the top guys in the world. I have more clients that have had hair transplants that I didn't even know until they told me out there that are absolutely fantastic. You wanna get some Botox? Go get some Botox. You wanna do whatever makes you feel the best that you can feel.
Yep.
I don't have an issue with any of that stuff. I really care about what I put on my body and what I put in my body. I think it matters. I don't mind telling people that I have no prescription in my glasses. They just make me feel smarter and create a barrier between me and who I'm speaking to that helps me get over the imposter syndrome and the insecurity that I
I
have.
love I love that. That's
All
awesome.
of these things like you help you to create again and to shape what your operating system is, what your standards are, what your habits are. I know I keep coming back to that, but I think that is at the foundation of all of this, which is security, which is confidence, which is having a plan. When you have a plan, you're able to operate better. When you're able to operate better, you feel better, you look better. All of these things, and that gets you into the happier, healthier, wealthier, stronger, having more fun lifestyle, which is the longest title in book history. Okay. Uh, and guys are digging it.
Yeah.
I love it. So, if you had to distill everything, the 6 F's, life by design, men's health, into one piece of advice for the midlife male, what would it be?
Ooh, I'm going to give you two because the first thing I'm going to start off with is don't give advice, share experiences. Share your experiences and let people take from them what they want to take.
I
I've
like
had
that.
greater response by giving generously in terms of sharing experience than I ever had when I was giving hard advice as if I know everything, because I don't
I
out
think
there.
that's awesome advice.
So, exactly. It's a double-edged sword. Now, the advice I'm giving you is to not give any advice and just share experiences. Boom, we're all on the same page. Absolutely.
Mm.
But one, share your experiences. We all have different experiences, but we can all glean from them. And the second thing really from is I think men get this. This is different for men and women. Run your life like you run your business. Men get that. You would
Mhm.
never expect accept underperforming quarter after quarter in your business. You have KPIs for everything. You got a marketing plan, you got a budget, you got sales goals, you got everything in there. Run your life like you run your business. If you're struggling in your life, when you apply the same principles that you use in business to your life, you're going to find yourself have a break. You're going to have a breakthrough. May not be immediate, but over time. Because you may not be the CEO of your company either, but you are always going to be the CEO of your own life. So when you take control and agency over that, that's when your life, midlife or otherwise, really starts to get better.
I love that. I love that because, it's it's all about perspective, right? You can think, oh my gosh, my life is half over. Or you can think, wow, I have the next half to do this better, to do it differently with all the experiences that I've had behind me to help give me better grounding and better footing.
Right.
Exactly. Look, you know, at 47, when I hit 47, I said I was in bonus time. Everything is perspective.
Yep.
Mhm.
Everything is perspective. You can see that your best days are behind you. You can choose to see that your best days are in front of you. You can choose to see things as if it being too late, or you can choose to see it as it's never too late to start. I mean, no, you can go from fat to fit.
Yeah.
You can go from fit to fat. You can do all of these things in both orders. Again, the choice is really yours.
Mhm.
And it doesn't the age, the stereotype or the phrase of like age is just a number. It truly is,
Yep.
but it's a number that matters.
Yes.
We still have a finite amount of time on this planet. So you can choose to do something with it or you can choose to waste it. And all of those things are up to you. You just got to figure out, look, do I want that six pack or am I happy, with a little bit over? Do I like
Yeah.
the extreme, like figure out again what your mastering of the middle again really looks like? Do I want to work 12 hours a day and never take a vacation? Or, do I want to make sure I'm at every one of my kids' games or 80% of my kids' games or we vacate? All of my point isn't throwing all this in the bucket. You get to choose. Pull out what you want, leave what you don't.
Yeah.
I love it. I really appreciate you being on the show, and we'll put in the links to your book and also to the newsletter, as well as your regimen for skincare. Greg has his own special midlife mail bundle on our website.
Yep.
But I really think that what you're doing is key. It's important. It's life changing. Like you're leaving a legacy. And not only that, you're teaching your sons how to also do it even better. They're going to have a leg up on that because they have you as a role model. And it's just really really important what you're doing, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. You had said it. I think we need to kind of lose the stigma of the tough male who doesn't talk, this and that. It's okay to talk. It's okay to be vulnerable. You need a shoulder to lean on, and people like who can give you their experiences, not their advice, on how they handled things, and I think that's really going to
Well, I
create a
hope
better future
so.
for people.
Because, yeah, Jamie, look, there are enough tough guys out
Yeah.
tough guys yelling, screaming, okay, telling you exactly how you need to do things to level up and triple your income and be a better and all of this. And we can sit around and redefine masculinity until the cows come. And I think there is a void in the marketplace, if you will, for
Mm.
kindness, for generosity, for
Yep.
levity, for humor, for success, and for gratitude, um, and for abundance, for all of these things, without also having to take ourselves so seriously that it becomes so daunting and so demanding, and you can never get off this hustle grind, more, and more isn't better.
Right.
Better is better. When it's all said and done, better is better. My grandmother used to say coffins don't have pockets.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it's not about, spending it all wildly or recklessly either. It's about that balance that you talked about. What I talk about is like harmony. Can you
Yeah.
have all these pieces in harmony? And if you can do that, great. Like, what's your cumulative GPA?
Right.
You talk about turning these F's into A's, and that does not mean you have to be a straight A student. But what's your cumulative GPA? When you run down that list, that stuff matters.
100%. And it's, like inventory at the end of the week. Maybe Friday you have more time for family. It is a thing, but it's making sure that you stay awake and present and intentional. And just remember who you are and do what you want to do.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly.
Thank you
Awesome.
again.
Well, Greg, it's been a pleasure having you on. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and speaking to us. And I think this is going to be great information for people listening. So really appreciate that. And with that, I'm out.
I'm out. Thank you, Greg. Have a great
And
day.
Jennifer, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you both.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.